Quigley in 5, underwater in the yellow lane.
Jazz Carling of Great Britain.
Quigley goes through.
The silver to Jazz Carling. Wonderful silver medal for Great Britain.
Welcome to the Honest Athletes podcast with
Lauren Quigley
and Jazz Carling.
Welcome back to the Honest Athletes. Today we're going to be talking about training. So training stories, maybe some of the hardest sessions we've done, maybe some of the easiest sessions we've done, maybe some of the funniest sessions we've done. Who knows what's going to happen today? But today's all going to be based around training. I just want to start though with a joke. And this is a joke that I think is hilarious, but no one else seems to. So I wanted to try it out on you, Jazz, and anyone that's watching or listening. And the joke is, why does the Queen never wave with this hand? Now, those that are listening on audio, I've raised my left hand here. Why doesn't the Queen wave with this hand, Jazz?
I've got no idea.
Because it's mine. But I'll have to edit one of those in.
Wait, because it's mine?
Because it's mine. It's my hand.
Oh. Oh no. Oh no.
Oh, gosh. I'll keep it in. I'll keep it in the edit, but this is going to be awful when people listen. If anyone found that funny, please let me know. Okay, so we obviously film these in advance. And so this will come out in a couple of weeks. But I would just love to ask, Jazz, how are you at the minute?
Oh, how am I?
Yeah.
What a question.
Good question.
No, I think I'm doing all right. The past couple of weeks I've been slightly unmotivated training wise, as in doing exercise and things like that. I think for me, not knowing when the end is like I've always my whole life been training for something. And I guess the podcast today is all about training. But my whole life I've been training for the next competition, for the next event. And even when I retired, it was training for London to Paris, training for all these kinds of different events, a triathlon, this, that, 10-kilometer run. There's always something that I'm training for, which I thrive off, which I love. I love having focus, structure, something to aim for. And that's what really motivates me. But this time especially is tough. And not just for me, but for a lot of people. And I guess for swimmers in particular, not being able to be in a swimming pool and training, it's very tough, not knowing when their next competition will be, not even knowing when their next swimming training session will be, when they'll be back with their club. So that is tough. But yeah, for me in particular, I think I am struggling with having that motivation to actually do exercise. And I guess it's trying to find ways to challenge myself in different ways and to excite me. But yeah, hit a bit of a plateau with like training, the motivation. I find myself, I'm so busy and I'm like, well, how am I so busy? Sometimes I'm like, how am I so busy? But yeah, there's still been loads of different things on with work, a couple of different bits work-wise. But yeah, pretty tough, like a lot of people. What about you? How are you?
Yeah, it's exactly the same. And I wanted to bring it up particularly because I feel the same, and I think a lot of people have. Anyone that I've spoken to recently has been like, the light at the end of the tunnel, there doesn't seem to be one. And I think because lockdown 1, it was summer and we could get out. Lockdown 2, we had Christmas to look forward to. This lockdown, there isn't really an end date. Now, hopefully in a couple of weeks, we might know more. I don't know when this is released, but just to anyone listening who might be struggling right now, I think everyone is. I think it's a common theme amongst everyone. And so the not knowing is difficult, but just stick with it. Try and stick with your routine. Also be pretty kind to yourself because it's a tough time. So let's jump into the training now. Jazz, give me something, a funny story or a hard session that you did. Let's jump in with something interesting to start with about your journey, what happened in your training.
I actually am going to find this episode really good fun because for me, training, I feel like I've done like a full circle with training where when I was younger, obviously it was fun. You're training, you're with your friends, you're having a great time and everything's quite fun and you're improving all the time. And then I felt like I went through a bit of a plateau where I maybe wasn't enjoying training so much, but thrived among the competitions, wasn't much of enjoying the training, but loved the competition. And then towards the end of my career, I actually loved the training side of it. And I loved pushing myself every day and challenging myself every day. So I feel like I've kind of done a full circle in terms of like enjoying it to then sometimes just mainly training to compete, training for the competitions. And then towards the end, I actually loved the training. I loved pushing myself day in, day out. And don't get me wrong, it is very challenging, very challenging doing a lot of training. And it would be really interesting to share like both of our kind of training stories and how much we used to do in the pool in obviously different events, do different kinds of things in training. So it'd be really interesting to share those with our audience. But yeah, I think training for me was always fairly long, mundane. Obviously, being a distance swimmer, on average, most of my weeks training would be around 75 kilometers a week. And I think the biggest week I ever did in the pool, so in 1 week, I swam 112 kilometers on a training camp.
Please elaborate on that, because I'd like to know how that worked out.
The funny thing is, I was actually only 14 years old. So the biggest training week of my life, and I was 14. And crazy, because it just wouldn't happen now. I came from a very small swimming club called Tiger Sharks. And on average, I would do around 30, pushing maybe 40 kilometers up until I was 16 and I moved away from Swansea, moved to Swansea, sorry. So I come from quite a small swimming club, and from a young age, I was always told, you need to do more meters. And like my coach is saying to me, look, we've got a pool, we've got our pool time. We actually can't get any more pool time unless she travels hours to go to train at a different pool around a school. It's not going to work. We're making it work with what we've got. So I used to do around 30 to 40 kilometers a week at Tiger Sharks in Swindon. And then I got asked to go on a training camp with GB, and the week there was 112 kilometers. So from being used to doing 30 to 40 kilometers to nearly do 3 times that amount in 1 week at 14. Honestly, like at times I was crying in my goggles. I remember there was like a session of
the next 3 weeks off after that.
I was actually, I was struggling big time. But you know what? I think it kind of challenged me. And, you know, you do have to go through some of those times where you are crying in your goggles. I do think it is, it sounds a bit funny. It is normal to cry in your goggles.
Can I just ask quickly, before you went, did you know that you had this massive volume week coming, or did you just get there and they were like, by the way, or was it day by day? We're like, we seem to be doing a lot of meters here.
From memory, I don't remember anyone ever addressing that this week, the week was going to be 112 kilometers. Each day I would just take it as it comes. But I was training with a group there, and Rebecca Cook, who was one of GB's best distance swimmer at the time, I was there with her coach and a group of distance athletes. And like I was just so far out of my depth, you know, I just wasn't maybe ready for that. But in a weird kind of way, and how I like to see things, it actually exposed me to, this is what people are doing. And I know, like, not many swimmers are doing that kind of distance now in the pool. And that was maybe seen as quite like an old school training, whereas people do tend to train a bit more smarter now. But in 1 week at 14 years old, doing 112 kilometers, I don't even know what that is. That's like way over 2 marathons, you know, in the pool, which is just crazy. But again, it didn't put me off. You know, I think some swimmers and some athletes, they go away and they feel out of their depth, and we had a set of 10 800s. I remember it vividly because I was crying in my goggles. Okay. And I think they were off a turnaround time of 10 minutes, which even now would be quite tough. Well, now it would definitely be tough, but when I was even fit, that would be tough. But 10 800s on 10 minutes, I think I made the first one, and then each one, the next one after, I just missed, and then the next one I was further off, and like each one I was just miles off, and I was crying in my goggles. But somehow that didn't actually put me off, thinking I still want, like, it still made me want to swim, and I wanted to be better, and I wanted to be quicker, and I wanted to be faster, and I wanted to be able to handle myself in these situations. But that was a really tough week of training. The only thing that made it better was we were away, and I think we were in a place in Spain, and so at least the sun was shining, and that could make most things better. So I think that actually made my week, that I was actually, even though I was in the pool for so long, I was actually working on my suntan whilst I was at it. What about you? What do you think your toughest, or have you got any really fond memories, or memories that you look back and like, whoa, that was a big memory in my training?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few. I've got a few down here. When I was at Manchester, we did 3100s off 110, short course that was. I was young and we were with a great group. I think the lads did it off 105.65, which was unbelievable. But that was tough. That was like mid Christmas challenge week. We did 2400 IMs as a Christmas challenge. But if anyone did single arm fly, we would have to start again. So we ended up doing 24.
What is with coaches and always wanting like a Christmas challenge? Like everyone's always like,
Teams
it's Christmas time, the
Christmas
most wonderful time of the year.
Yeah.
Let's push them and see what we can do. See how much we can hurt them before they stuff their face with roast potatoes.
Absolutely. Teams seem to either go Christmas challenge, let's kill them, or Christmas fun, and they seem to do something fun in the pool. I was always on the Christmas challenge end, but I also liked a Christmas challenge, so it didn't really bother me too much. I've got a very funny story I'll tell you in a minute, but we did 4K, a 4K set, and then a gym circuit, a 3K set, then a gym circuit, 2K, gym circuit, 1K, gym circuit. So we did 10K and 4 different gym circuits once. That was difficult. For some reason, one of my hardest sessions has been since I retired. In between lockdown 1 and 2, I went out to Lanzarote because that's where I've been living for the last 2 years. I don't anymore, but that's where I was living. And I went out just to see everyone. And me and my best mate were like, let's do something because my best mate's just as crazy as I am. And so I challenged her to a 10K as 100 hundreds freestyle. But I thought, I've done that many a time, you'll have done it, lots of swimmers do it. So I thought, how can I make this difficult? So I did 10K IM as 10 400s, 10 300s, 10 200s, 10 100s. And
You are crazy.
And I hadn't swam for months. It's like I'd broke my arm, my wrist, blah, 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 blah. So I hadn't swam for ages. And I just was like, oh, let's just do it. So for some reason, I decided to do that. The hardest sessions for me, though, physically were 650s lactate tolerance off reducing rest, 1050s suited, things like that. A funny / not funny story at the time, though, we did, again, a Christmas challenge, 8100s off 80 in the dungeons downstairs at Manchester, which was long course. And it was me and my brother. Everyone else had gone away. So it was me and my brother, Grant, who stayed back from our squad. And so we got given 8100s off 80. And we'd got for Christmas, an early Christmas present, we'd got, the earphones where you can listen to music. We'd got given those. This was years ago. And so we're like, oh, brilliant. We've got 8100s. We'll listen to music, get a playlist going, fantastic. So set up this playlist that I thought was going to last for the same amount of time and got it all ready. So, and what I did was, I don't know why, but I did ear things, goggles, then hat. And so I had these ear things in. And my first song was Enrique Iglesias' Hero. Don't ask why, but it was. And so we set off, and I'm like, this is going to be tough, but at least I got my music. Did the first length, turned, the song replayed. So off 80, I didn't have much rest. So I couldn't take them out because they're connected wire, goggles. So I was like, right, okay, it might not do it every time. I'll just keep going. Turn, Enrique Iglesias starts again. So for 8100s, I listened to Enrique Iglesias' Hero, not even the whole song, just the bit that I would get to. And I turned, so I'd know if I was slipping off pace because I'd hear more of the song. So now I can look back and laugh at it. But at the time, I was absolutely livid. And every time I hear the song now, I flinch a bit because I'm just like, oh, God. So
do you like to listen to music? I know maybe not the same song, but did you used to like having music on? Now we're training on your bike or this. Do you normally have music on, or
normally? Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think I didn't obviously at the start when I was at Saracens, and then when I went to Manchester, particularly when Mark Rose was coaching, he would always have tunes blasting out. Yeah. And so whenever I then went back to training without music, I could hear everyone breathing, and it was just weird, What about you? Did you like music?
Yeah, I actually, now if I run, I have to listen to music because I literally have that thing where I can't hear my breath. I literally can't hear my breath. Like I can't hear my me breathing really heavy because it freaks me out even talking about it now. It's like, oh, like I hate that noise. So I have to listen to something loud enough that I can't hear myself breathing. But my old coach, David McNulty, used to love like house music, like Ibiza, like, and he'd have it blazing. He's got these huge speakers at the Bath National Centre, and we'd be in the middle, and he's like jamming along, you know, like in these heart rate sets. It's so
you thought you were away abroad. Like a holiday.
But I did think that helped, you know, it's nice hearing it. And I think one thing that does make a big difference to training, music or not music, I think you're either one or the other, but also the coach that brings the energy and how much that can make a difference to your session. And there's times in training, you know, I've like been falling off and like slowly getting slower arms and like not being able to, and when the coach can really bring out that kind of sixth gear, that extra 5% at the end of a session, which can actually make such a big difference. And I think that's what's so powerful, is when a coach can drive you to those levels. Because even at times it's different now because I'm obviously not training for the Olympics or whatever. But you know, when I'm on the bike and I'm like spinning on the watt bike, doing a session, and like all the time I'm like, oh, do I want to do the last 5 minutes? And I just count down. I'm like counting down how long I've got left. And like, I know if a coach was in there, like, come on, you know, going at me, I would find that extra 5%. And I think that's what's quite unique about swimming, because you find in some sports in triathlon, and that they can go out on the bike and they're very self-driven, self-motivated and push themselves. Whereas in swimming, we're very used to having coaches that are pushing ourselves. And I think definitely towards the last kind of 6 to 8 years of my career, I was very self-driven. I could have cracked on with a lot of training on my own, but I do think that extra kind of 5-10% when a coach can really bring you energy, bring you up when you're starting to kind of fall off in the middle of a training session, is a key one. What do you think about that? Do you think that made a big difference with coaches?
Definitely. I think if you imagine though, just having a coach on poolside that's just like counting down with you, like, oh, thank gosh, you've only got 2 reps left, or there's no music and no atmosphere. There's no encouragement. There's no inspiration. You know, you've mentioned Dave stood on poolside getting into the tunes and everything, and it spurs you on, like even something super simple, a certain song or whatever it is, it definitely makes a difference for sure. But in terms of, I know you did, the hardest week was 112 kilometers, which is insane, but is there one session that was just so hard and you were just like, this is absolutely ridiculous? It doesn't have to be long. It might be the longest, I don't know. But is there one session that sticks out to you from your career?
I don't know whether there's like one in particular session. And even when I look back at like some of the hardest things I've done, normally they're some of the best sessions that I remember that I've done really well.
Well, that was going to be the next one. Is there a set that sticks out that you were like flying and you were like, this is great?
Well, it's tricky. I think if I'd say one of the mentally toughest sessions has probably been 10-800s. I've done that quite a few times, you know. And when I was at Bath National Centre with Dave McNulty and Graham Antwistle, every Wednesday would be like my kind of challenge set, and it would be huge. The main set could be 6K, 6.5, or go up to 8 kilometres, you know, wow. 10-800. So that would be like a Wednesday would be like a challenge set most weeks, where it would just be kind of long, short rest. And I used to love short interval training. So not having much rest, coming in, can I make the time? You know, I used to love that. But yeah, I don't know. There was quite a lot of sessions with my old coach, Bud McAllister in Swansea, that stand out. That was like, whoa, like I swam really quick. We used to do sets of like 14 400s, and I'd finish on 416, like wow. Long course from a push, just in my training costume. So there's quite a few like sessions like that. I remember we did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 with Bud, and he got 8 boys to do a relay swim next to me, and I finished on 840 from a push. Wow. And negative split it. So like there's sessions like that which I look back and they are really tough sessions, because they were off, I think it was off a really short interval, either 110 or 115, but to finish off on an 840 or a 416, I've got a lot of those where I'm like, whoa, that was tough. But most of the time it's because I'm trying to get a really good session out of it. And one of Bud's main things was to try and swim as much as you can at race pace in training. So With Bud, I've got a lot of things where I was like, whoa, I used to swim that quick in training because he used to want me to swim as close to race pace or on race pace as much as I could. But in terms of like the most challenging or hardest sessions, I think it's probably those kind of ones. He used to give us 65 100s a lot, where there'd be 55 of them would be on 115 or 110. I don't know, because it's like the short interval stuff I think is really challenging, but I used to thrive on them. So I wouldn't necessarily say they were the hardest, but they were some of my best sessions. But there's not really like one standout, like really tough session, I think. There's just a combination of a lot of different things, you know? What about you?
Yeah. Again, same as you. There's a lot. Obviously, there's a lot. We did however many sessions. I hate to even think about how many sessions we did in our whole careers. There's one set that sticks out for me. That was at the Commonwealth Games holding camp before Glasgow. We were at the London Aquatic Centre, and my coach on that team was James Gibson, and I always had fun with James Gibson. Absolutely unbelievable coach. But I had a session set for me, which I'd been practicing leading up to the holding camp and then obviously to go on to commies. And it was 4 100s, but as 150s. And so you'd build 50 in and then you do 100 at a pace, basically. And we're like a week before the competition at Glasgow, and I hit 1 minute points for each of the hundreds for 100 backstrokes. I did them backstroke, and I was like, this is amazing. You know, next week I'm going to break the minute. It's going to be brilliant. If I can do it from a turn in just a training suit, there's no way I can't do it next week in a racing suit off a start and everything. Didn't break the minute, by the way, next week, but I just got out and I was like, oh, I feel great. You know, there's nothing like that feeling of being like, wow, that was great. And that probably one of the few times that I was actually impressed with myself and like, oh, actually, you're all right, you know. But the problem with that was my coach said I was ready too early. So I was like flying the week before. I don't know if you've ever had that, but then when it got to the race, I was ready too early. Have you ever had that?
I don't know. You know, it's funny, those tapers, because my taper, we'll go on to that in another episode properly, but my taper was quite short. So often I didn't actually feel that great in the lead up to a competition. I wouldn't be like flying and doing really quick times. It would just be, I guess, kind of normal for me because the taper was so short, maybe a week to 10 days. But I'd never really had that. I think... yeah, I guess sometimes you can feel great in the lead up to a competition, and then a competition day you feel awful and it's not quite gone to plan and it's like, what's going on? You have all those questions. But yeah, it's a difficult one. So quickly, what kind of trainer with you? Because I feel like there are various different types of trainers. You know, I've been around some athletes where you look at them in training and you're like, whoa, like they train so hard, they grind in every single session. And then maybe it doesn't quite go as well as you think they would from off their training in competitions, or you've got some people that are maybe like not as great in training, but in a competition they just thrive and like step up and like really perform really well. But when you look at their training, you're like, oh, they maybe don't train as well. So I think there's so many different types of trainers as well. So what kind of trainer were you in the pool?
I trained hard. I trained really hard. And I think that's due to the family that I've grown up with. I come from a swimming family. They were really hard workers. My mum had to do something ridiculous like 10 400s fly in a woolly jumper. So I used to obviously listen to those stories and be like, wow, like, you know, you've got to work hard. And so I took that. However, I say that my brother, he was like diving for pearls at the bottom of the pool, having a lap. Goggles seemed to break quite a lot, you know, all that sort of stuff. As he went on in his career, he was like a really hard trainer as well. But at the beginning, he was just like not interested, as in would rather his goggles break and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I trained hard. And I think as well, the environment, I've said it before, but I was lucky with the clubs that I went to. My first club, Saracens, great teammates. We all trained hard. We worked on our skills, all that sort of stuff. Manchester, we all worked hard. You were accountable, and people were almost scared to not train hard because you would get the banter of, you know, oh, you're a wuss or this or that. So everyone made each other accountable for training hard. Went to Stockport, exactly the same again, with some fantastic people where you were inspired to train hard and there wasn't really an option not to. And if someone wasn't on it, it was like, hey, what are you doing? Come on here. And you'd be straight back on it. So I always trained hard. And then when I went to race, I raced pretty well. I think my racing personality, my training personality were fairly different. I was probably more of a fighter in training against myself than in a race against other people. So that was interesting. But yeah, I'd say I was a hard trainer. How about you?
Yeah, I always worked hard. I think when I actually first moved to Swansea, obviously I was known for maybe the 400 and 800 that I thought they were going to be my main events. And then I moved to Swansea and my results came quicker in actually the 200 and the 400. And so I think because then I'd got results, or like I felt like I was improving in the 200 and the 400, I actually was so unmotivated and didn't want to do the 800 anymore because I wasn't getting those results as quickly and my times hadn't dropped in the 800. And so my focus became like, oh, well, I don't need to do the distance work. I'm going to go for like the middle distance sessions, you know, in the 200 and 400. And I guess looking back, it was quite like a short-minded mindset, and I should have maybe given myself a go with the 800 too, but it made me focus on the middle distance stuff. But I think always been a very tough trainer to push myself and really, really driven. At times, like I think obviously with illness and things, you know, it's not always been a smooth road, and training has been very tough at times. And I guess you do talk about it with a bit of a motivation, and some days you do feel more motivated than others. And when things are going well, it's very easy to feel very motivated. But yeah, like I think it was only really, I think I found a huge, even more drive and determination than ever after missing out on the 2012 Olympics, when like in training, I just became ruthless with everything, you know, and always putting myself in the harder sessions, the harder group, the distance, doing extra after every single session. And it's not that I didn't maybe push myself as hard before, but I became like even more driven and determined than ever before. And that did raise the bar in training, and not being satisfied with the kind of average training sets, or even like I would do some great stuff in training, but I wouldn't always be satisfied with it. I would always want more, and I would always want to push for more. So I think that really did push me to new heights in training and expectations, and open my eyes. And I really did focus on, well, the 800 in particular, the distance events, which actually then helped me in my 400 and my 200. One thing that Dave, when I moved to the Bath National Centre in 2014, Dave McNulty said to me, I want to get you quicker in the 200 so you can go out faster in your 400, so then you can go out faster in your 800. So that made a lot more sense to me as well, that I don't need to just focus on the distance events. I need to try and work on my speed as well. And we tried out with some speed endurance and a few different things like that. But I think that's what's really important, especially when talking to some athletes, and even in particular the young swimmers, is don't feel like just because one event isn't going as well that you shouldn't train for it, or that you should neglect certain events. Because I definitely did when I was younger. I felt like I wasn't getting results in the 800, so I was going to focus on the middle distance, the 200 and the 400. And I wish I hadn't. I wish I'd kind of given the 800 a go as well, and had that confidence that I could still do that event. And you do see it in some swimmers where they can go from different swimming, racing one event and then racing others. But I think never neglect certain events or training, just give them all a go, because I think you never know where it could take you. And just because one event might not be going well in certain competitions, it doesn't mean that it's not going to go well for forever. It will definitely come back. So I think in training, I was always very driven, but definitely after coming back from a setback and a real huge disappointment, it made me even more determined and pushing myself to new levels, you know, in training and heights. And I remember Bud was on it with, he would be able to predict what kind of time I would go in a competition off what I was doing in training. So he would be very motivational in terms of, well, if you can go this time in training, I think you can go this in a competition. And that used to motivate me quite a lot, was that the times that I could do in training would be able to get me to something in a competition too. But yeah, always quite enjoyed training. I think obviously, as we said, you go through peaks, troughs, and sometimes it's not always that exciting to go to training, and swimming is one of those sports, you know. Bud used to give me, I was with Bud for 7.5 years, and he probably rotated the same 10 warm-ups in those 7 years, you know.
Yeah, I know that.
So it's like you're doing a sport and you are going up and down that black line, and like there's no way to sugarcoat, like it's not the most like exciting. You can't mix every single session up. Yeah, it's a great way for coaches to bring things in to make things exciting, to keep you stimulated. But at the end of the day, you are just swimming up and down a pool, and they're just trying to make things in a different way to get the same goal. So I think it's not always the most exciting, but trying to find new ways to push yourself, staying an extra to work. I used to have to work on my turns all the time, do an extra at the end, and I'd stay and I'd do extra pull, I'd do extra sculling and things like that, by doing those things that I knew that I needed to work on. So I think it's really interesting actually, like how different people train. And again, I guess as you get older, you try and listen to your body a bit more instead of just grinding up and down, pushing yourself harder and harder and harder. It's actually listening to your body and thinking, oh, is this enough? I'm like, do I need rest and all that kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with everything you've just said there. It's so important to recognise that and just get to know yourself really as a trainer, and what makes you tick and what doesn't, and all that sort of stuff, because you aren't motivated every day to go and swim. You're not. You do 10 plus swim sessions a week. You're doing however many gyms. You're trying to do stretching. You're trying to balance life as well, and it's tough. And you get tired. And like I said, realistically, you aren't motivated every day. And so when motivation goes out the window, what are you going to go to that's going to get you to training? And I think one thing I like to focus on when I was training, even like to this day, give 100% every time you go to train. And that doesn't mean that you should be 100% of 100%. And this probably doesn't make much sense right now, but your 100% on Monday might not be 100% on Tuesday. It might only be 64%, but it's your 100% that day. Now, I haven't taken any drugs today. I promise. This is genuine. This is like coffee. Something that, yeah, just coffee. I know that this, sometimes you can be like, what are you talking about? You have your 100%. And like I said, every day, your 100% won't be right at the top. It might be 60%. It might be 70%. It might be 30%. But as long as you're giving everything, you can't do any more. And I think something that helped me when motivation had gone was like, okay, when I get to race, can I say that I gave 100% every single time I went in? You know, it's hard, because even on days I'd be like, I don't even care about that. You know, some days you just really like, I'd rather just not go. And obviously you have to assess every single situation and be honest, true to yourself. Do I go to training? Do I not? 9 out of 10 times it will be a yes. Or you're tired? Well, crack on, because your rival in America or Australia is going training. So you chose to do it, get going. But some days, yes, it is like, okay, maybe I need to just take tonight and rest or whatever. And it's really hard as an athlete as well, because athletes feel guilty, a lot of them, if they don't go training. And so it's like, you've got all these emotions, feelings, and everything going through your mind, body, whatever, that you've got to deal with, assess the situation, make the right decision. But as you get older, you will learn a bit more about yourself. But it is just learn about yourself and be honest with yourself and your coach and everyone around you. When the motivation had run out for you, Jazz, what did you go to get you to the pool?
Oh, tough question. I tell you what, every morning for me was a challenge. Every morning. I was
going to say, you hate mornings.
I wish I loved them. I don't know what, like, I would love to know this. If anyone's listening that has got any like science, am I just not made for the mornings, or is it my mindset? Because maybe I do need, like, I do want to be good in the mornings. I want to like jump out of bed in the mornings and feel great. But like my body and my brain have other ideas when that alarm goes off, you know. I'm a big sleeper. So every morning was a challenge for me, you know. Every morning it's like, why am I throwing myself out of bed when it's like freezing outside, it's dark, I'm about to jump in a cold pool. Like, why am I doing this to myself? Like almost every single morning I'd say that. And like, even like, I barely, like when I was younger, I barely murmur a word like to my dad or my mum driving me to the pool. I was like, you know, like making the noise, you know, that would be it.
What's the worst bit about mornings for you? Getting out of bed, or was it getting in the pool? Because for me, I like mornings, you see. I don't necessarily like getting up, but I used to love being done in the mornings. But diving into that pool was the worst thing every single time. When I'd got in and warmed up, I was fine, but...
Yeah, I mean, I think it was probably both. Probably both. Getting out of bed was probably tough, but I don't know that Dave, my old coach, used to go on at us because like we'd all be on the side, like like thinking, oh, we've got to dive into this cold pool and like all that, and
throwing yourself about on poolside. Oh,
you know, like the pain that is coming in that session as well, and that first like initial dive in the pool. Oh, it's a tough one. It is a tough one. But like, yeah, it's normalizing. You're not going to feel like driven and motivated every single day. But in the back of my mind, there's always something that I'm training for. I'm doing it for the bigger picture again. This is one small piece of that huge puzzle that I'm making a difference to. And you don't want to miss that piece from the puzzle because that could be a really important part of the puzzle. But for me, standing on the block, knowing that I'd again, as you said, every single session I'd given it my best. And don't get me wrong, I've had some stinkers of training sessions.
Oh, we all have. That could be a whole other episode, I'm sure.
Honestly, some sessions I would get in and I want to swim well. I want to swim fast. I want to do the session really well. I want to do a max session. But my body is like feeling like lead bricks, like pulling me to the bottom of the pool. And like, no matter how hard you try, I could not get a great session. And, you know, some of those sessions were very mentally challenging. And one thing that I find tough is like when your coach is questioning, are you giving 100%? And I'm like, I am always giving 100%. Like if I cannot move, it is not because I don't want to move, you know? And another funny one is when you're training at altitude and the things that I've seen that happen to some people. And like, I look at some people in the pool training, I'm like, you look like you're going backwards, like how slow they go in altitude. But it's so funny. But again, I've seen it and I've trained with people that would have 3 weeks of like not training well and not like look like so bad in training. And then they'll have a couple of great weeks and they go back. And in swimming terms, we call this as like going into a bit of a hole or going through some adaptations, you know, where your body is adapting, and training is tough. But I've gone through I didn't used to have them too often, which was quite well. I could handle the training pretty well. But when I did have a bad session, God, I could barely move. I could barely swim. Honestly, if some people used to look at me on some of those sessions, they'd be like, what? She's actually goes those times. But I think that's what makes it also great is like, you go through those ups, downs in training. Sometimes it goes really well and you can feel amazing. It's the best feeling in the world when you've had a great session, and you can walk away out of those doors and you can think, God, like I swam so well. Like that is up there with one of my best sessions I've ever had. But then you can walk out like a few days later and you can think, God, that was one of the worst training sessions I have ever done.
Maybe I should pick a different sport.
Yeah. But that is completely normal. And one thing I do say, and I'm not sure if I've actually spoken about it yet, but especially in the lead up to the Olympics, I used to make notes on when the sessions went really well. And I'd try and make positive notes in this like little booklet of the things that had gone really well from training, if I'd hit race pace really well, if I'd done something really well in the gym, and all these kind of positive things. So when I did get to the competition, instead of my brain telling me all these, oh no, like you're racing, are you ready? I actually had all these like notes of things that I'd done really well. Because I think sometimes we do focus, we could have like 8 weeks of great training and we could have like one bad week of training, and instead of focusing on the 8 really great weeks that we've had, we can focus on that really one bad week or that one bad session, and it seems to take it and you actually focus on the bad side of it. So I think it is really important to actually recognize when things are going well, when give yourself a pat on the back, One thing I wish in training is that I'd actually been like, that was a great session. Come on, like have confidence in yourself because you've done that very well. I think that's really important.
I was just going to say, you can do, I was very hard on myself like most athletes are, and you can do 10 hundreds and 9 of them can be absolutely fantastic. One of them, you just missed the time you're trying to go for, and it's like, that was awful, that session, awful. And now I look back and I think, what were you doing? Like, celebrate that you've just done a great set. Instead of focusing on that one, focus on the 9. And it's so common and so easy for us to focus on the negatives as humans. But yes, so important to point out the good stuff, not the bad stuff all the time. It's good to build on positive. Right, Jazz, I don't know if you ever heard this phrase, if it was ever used at your swimming club. It was brought to my attention the other day. I was explaining to a fellow triathlete about this word, and they'd never heard of it. Sammy Saver.
Of course I know what it was.
Okay, you do know what it is.
It was actually a guy that we used to train with in Swansea.
Called Sam, bless him.
No, his name actually wasn't Sam, but because he always saved it till the last rep.
He was the Sammy Saver.
Sammy.
Yes. So I used the term the other day. I was on the bike. We were on Zwift, and I just used it as a joke. And my friend said, "Oh, something about Sammy Saver," and I said, "Oh no, don't use that word. It's like the worst thing that you can say and submit to another swimmer." And they were like, "Oh gosh, I didn't know." And I was like, "Yeah, it's like really bad." And so we used to use it up north a lot. But when I spoke to some swimmers from down south, they don't know what it means. So it baffled me a little bit. But have you ever been called a Sammy Saver or called anyone else a Sammy Saver? I know you just said yes, that you used to call this guy Sammy. But did anyone ever call you Sammy?
They might not have said it to my face. I don't remember.
I think from what you've said in training, I doubt it.
Yeah, I don't think so. Sammy Saver is where we say,
sorry.
So say you're doing a set of 30 100s and you go through the set, like making it through, and then you'll sprint the last one. And like, you could be at the back of the group and then all of a sudden you sprint the last one and you like beat everyone and everyone's like, what? Like, where were you for the other 29? So that's how we describe a Sammy Saver, or that's how I do. I don't know whether you're the same.
Yeah, no, exactly the same. I would say it's not if you've tried hard and then you really try on the last one, because that's fantastic to finish strong. It's more if you can see them, they're coasting their way through the session, everyone's getting annoyed with them, and then all of a sudden on the last one they seem to beat everyone somehow.
Yeah, it's hard because at times I've probably some of my last reps of the set have always been like one of the quickest, but that's normally because the coach is asking it and the coach wants that to be the fastest rep and to mimic what it would be in like a race. So you want your,
and you've tried all the way through, you've not just
and you want your last 50, your last 100 of like an 800 to finish really strong. And that was actually one thing. I was in 2013 in the World Champs. I came fourth by 0.14, but I was actually in bronze position at 350 in the 400. So I was in third place and then I got beaten on the last 50 so I came fourth. And so literally for that year, like I would always ask my coach, can I do one more 50? And I want it to be the fastest rep of the set. Or can I do a stand-up 100? Can I do a stand? And like, it's funny how my brain would work. But to me, in my head, that gave me confidence that I was finishing all my tough sessions, all my hard sessions. I was finishing it with a really fast rep, with a really hard rep, a max rep, because that was what gave me confidence that I could turn on the last 100 or the last 50 of a distance event, 400 and 800, and that I would be confident that I could get my hand on the wall the quickest. And it's funny because that's how like the tactics play, but in the distance events, I guess in the sprint events, you're not thinking so much of that. But when you can be, say, for an 800, you can be in third place the whole way on coast to win a medal, and then someone can come on the last 50. But I just wanted to make sure that I had everything in the tank, so I would finish strong. And I knew that if I was in a close head-to-head on the last 50, that I would be able to finish strong. But yeah, Sammy Sabre, I don't think I used to do that for much of the training sessions, but yeah, I would always want to give the whole set my full 100%. But yeah, you'd always want to finish strong. And one thing that Bud, my coach, used to do in Swansea was on the last rep of certain sessions, he would put us all one in each lane and we'd race.
Yeah.
And so he would want to get head to head. So you'd always be lined up against people and you'd have to race. You'd have to see what you can do at the end of a set. So that was actually really important. And God, I used to get nervous for those, even in training, and like, because you'd really want to do well. And again, sometimes it would go really great, and other times you're like really disappointed. You're like, oh, I'm just not where I want to be. But yeah, I think it's important to give it all you go. But yes, not be afraid to race and stand up and finish strong as well. But always give your best during it as well.
Definitely. And it's good to go through those times in training where you do get a bit nervous, because it's just practice. It's all practice for when you come to a race, definitely. And a lot of people listening now, because obviously we're talking about training, it's a good topic. A lot of people will be thinking, when did Jazz or when did Lauren start on the 10 swim sessions a week, 3 gym sessions a week? What age do we step up, or do we hold back? Or how do you progress from being a junior into being a senior? And when do you step up? And obviously it's a very individual thing for each swimmer, but there's got to be some sort of, vague plan or vague program that seems appropriate. Because when I was younger, again, I come from a swimming family. My mum, I was lucky because my mum would say, you're not doing those mornings yet. And all my friends when I was younger were doing all the mornings. And I'd be like, oh, please, Mum, I'd love to just swim with my friends. I want to do it all, da, 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 da. And she would go, no, you're not doing it yet. And I didn't understand at the time, but obviously now I look back and I think all those people that were doing all the mornings were quit by 16, burnt out, hated it, all those sorts of things. And I was still going and loving it beyond that. And so what did your progression in training look like?
Yes, again, question I get asked a lot. It's how many hours of training were you doing at 14 years old or 12 years old? And it's actually quite difficult to remember how much I was doing at a certain age. I think from the age of like 14 to 16, I think I was swimming 8 swimming sessions a week, but they were probably an hour and a half. So I was maybe doing 12 hours, 14 hours at a maximum. I think it was on average, probably around 12 hours a week. Up till the age of 16 when I moved to Swansea, and then I started to progress, and then it was kind of 9, mainly 10 sessions a week, up to 20 hours, sometimes a little bit more. So I think as well, when you're younger, it's really important to look after yourself, and you've got other things. There's school, there's other stressful things that are going on, and you're doing other sports. You're doing PE at school. I used to do netball. I used to do a lot of other sports. So it's not to focus on like, oh, I need to do a certain amount, or I need to do this, and just stay in the sport. I think that's really important. And focus on the time that you do have in the pool and you do have to train. I think that's one thing. It's instead of thinking, I need to do this, I need to do more, I need to do this, it's focus on the time that you do have and make the most of it. And you will be able to progress. And we've spoke about it a lot on the junior to senior transition. The training and the changes and how to look for different programs and where to look. But I think it was probably when I moved 16, 17, and as I started to get older, that I was maybe more specific to the distance stuff. Again, when I was younger, doing a lot of different things, mainly endurance stuff, mixture of freestyle and medley. But I think it was when I got older that it was more specific, and you then start to kind of tear off into your events. Your coach is kind of giving you stuff focused towards the events that they think you're going to race. And that only happens when you get older. So I think I kind of always say it's like having the kind of pyramid, like building the blocks, and then as you get older you build in more blocks, and then you start to become more specific. Again, I'm pointing like a pyramid, if you can watch on YouTube, but I'm just explaining that if people are listening. But you build those blocks, you build the foundations, and then you start to build more blocks, and you just build that pyramid, and become a lot more focused as you get older. What about you, Quigley? How much hours in training were you doing as a youngster?
People ask me this question, and I can't even think what age you are in year 4 or year 5 or secondary school. So I don't know. Like, I can't give you a specific. You've just said you were doing up to 14 hours. I was probably doing something similar. I wasn't one of the kids that was doing it all when I was younger, because I would also do different sports as well. And it was a natural progression for me. I can't give specifics again. I'm not sure, but if I was tired, then I wouldn't go train. You know, if I was really tired as a youngster and I was at school and everything, I wouldn't go training. My mum used to say, I'll wake you up. If you fall back to sleep, you won't go. So, and she knew that she could trust me, because I know a lot of people would just go back to sleep then. But I
would fall asleep.
I couldn't. I feel guilty if I do that. And I was always up. First alarm. I've never had to snooze an alarm in my life. I'm up. I've never snoozed an alarm before.
I always have 2 alarms every day.
No, you see, one alarm.
No, I like 2 alarms. The first alarm is like warning. Yeah. Warning, you will be getting up shortly. Yeah. And then the second alarm, you got to get out of here.
You see, one take wonder over here, up. Got to go. And if I'd go, I'm not going to go today, I'm just going to chill, I'd lie there for about a minute and then I'd be like, nah, I've got to go. So I'd be out and gone. Just before we finished, 2 words. Let's see if you've got any funny stories to do with them. Goggle challenge.
Goggle challenge. I've rarely done it, to be honest.
Oh, Jazz, you've not been a professional swimmer.
But like, the thing is, being a distance swimmer, like, you don't get a lot of fun things. Like distance training, I feel like we could go on these about training for so long, but like distance training isn't as much fun as the sprinters. Like, I would be looking over at the sprinters, wishing I could play with the cords and like do like really fun drills.
The cords. Like, you just insulted every sprinter in.
Yeah. No, not playing with the cords.
Play with the cords.
No, that's not disrespectful, but like.
Oh yeah, this is going to be so much fun.
It looks like so much fun, like being pulled in on a swim cord, and like while I'm in the middle of 12 400s or like doing turns and like stuff like that. Like sprint tech training does look like more fun than distance training.
I do know what you're saying. But
I'm not saying one's harder than the other, but I'm saying
okay.
As a distance swimmer, sprint training looks like loads more fun.
Yeah.
And
I know what you mean. Yeah.
As a distance swimmer, I didn't get to do the goggle challenge that much. I can't remember.
Well, look, next time we're in a pool, Jazz, we're going to do the goggle challenge. On our swim camps, the goggle challenge will be coming up anyway. Just for those that don't know what the goggle challenge is, take your swimming goggles off your face, you stand on the side, you've got the flags at 5 meters, and you have to try and throw your goggles, and then you need to, the hope is to catch them on the flags. And normally something great comes if you actually get it on the flags. And so I've got a very funny story. It was at Stockport Metro, and it was a Saturday morning. We had an absolute demon of a set to do. And it was all the squads were in it together. And we were all lined up, and for the whole pool, the parents were watching. And the deal with the coach was, if someone got it on, we could go home. So one after the other, everyone kept throwing the goggles, missed. Some people would hit it and they'd fall off. You know, we got close, and the whole of the pool was really invested by the time it got to the last few. Even James Goddard, who we say that people stay in, you've said you stayed in, you trained extra, you did an extra 50, you did an extra. James Goddard would practice the goggle challenge at the end of every single session, just to make sure that when we got asked to do it, that he would get it nailed on. And he got really good at it, to be fair. He did a lot of training for the goggle challenge. But James missed it, and Jimmy was our, our hope. We were like, Jimmy will get it on. Jimmy missed it. And it gets to the last swimmer. And it's got to be the shyest swimmer at the club. And it's you can imagine what's coming. So we're all thinking, we're getting our goggles back on really, because we're thinking we've got to do this set now. There's this one person left. I'll give them a random name, Sammy. Wasn't a Sammy saver, but Sammy. And we're all thinking, Sammy's got to throw it now. So just get your goggles on, get ready for the set. Sammy throws it. It's like slow-mo. So it's going like this, tumbling, hits the flags perfectly, lands on. Everyone, the poolside erupts. All the swimmers start running up to their parents, giving them a hug as if they've just won the Olympics. Like, it was the best moment. We must have had such a hard week of training, and everyone was just so happy that we managed to get the goggles on. That Sammy became hero. We probably should have got like a statue outside of Grand Central. But it was just a great moment. And it was one that I'll just remember for the rest of my life in terms of training. I know it wasn't really, we didn't do any, but it's just a great story. But I'm really sad to hear that you didn't do Goggle Challenge. That makes me upset.
Like Dave McNulty at Bath, he used to be like, he was sometimes, very rarely, like if you could do a stand-up and he'd say what time you'd have to go, and it'd be really quick time, but like close to your best. And if you could go that time, like you'd just be able to swim out and get out or whatever. But like, he wouldn't be doing any of the Goggle Challenge. And if it's like, some people would be like, oh, can we do it? And he'd be like, nah.
Doesn't happen often, but when it does, fantastic. Dr. Feelgood, did you ever have Dr. Feelgood?
No idea what that is.
Dr. Feelgood for us was you just do as much as you want until you feel good and you can get out. So a lot of people would just go sit at the end, go and have a shower and go home. And we actually, go on.
Yeah. With Dave, sometimes like it would be like a choice that he would kind of do that feel good. So it would be that kind of choice session, do what you need. So we'd have that, do what you need. But he'd like give options. So it'd be like 2K, 3K, 4K, 5. But like he would judge you, like, and you didn't want to be judged. You didn't want to be judged. Like I couldn't go in and do 2K, and he knew that. So I'd get in and do like 6. I'd choose to do 6 or 7K on a choice session. Choice easy, feel good session. I would choose to go in. And also in the back of my mind, I was like counting how many meters I'd done the week. So I knew I was kind of heading for targets. And if I didn't do as much on that session, I'd have to catch up on others. So most of the time, didn't really have those. It
wasn't really your choice at all. We actually convinced one of the swimmers that there was a doctor that came in and told us how much to do. And so every day we'd be like, is that the doctor on the back? Oh, no, it looks like him, but it's not. And she'd be like, oh, is it? But yeah, just little things. I mean, I've made it sound out like we had a great time and every day we're doing Goggle Challenge or Dr. Feelgood. It was tough training. These were very rare moments, which is why they're probably so special right now.
We could talk about training all day, and I think there's so many different things, but I think, we've kind of touched on a lot of the training memories, journeys and experiences that we've had, but I know there'll be so much more that we can explore, and obviously taper and things like that, heading into a competition and things like that. There's so many different avenues, but it was really nice actually to go back and talk about some of the memories through training.
Yeah, I think as well, Jazz has come up with some absolute golden nuggets there for people listening, and it's just important to highlight that the training obviously takes up such a huge percentage of your sporting career that just try and enjoy them as much as you can. Even the awful sessions, you will look back on them and remember them like we are, and be proud of it, because every day you're getting in, you're challenging yourself physically, mentally, and it's something to be proud of, definitely. So just enjoy as much as you can. And, it's about the journey. It's about the journey. But no, thank you for listening. We've got a fantastic episode next week coming. So keep your eyes peeled, ears peeled. Is that how you're going to say it? We are obviously on Spotify, YouTube, Anchor, Apple, all those platforms every Wednesday at 5. And yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.